The morning started like any other. Sunlight was slanting through the blinds, painting stripes across the bedroom floor. My alarm clock buzzed softly. I reached over, silencing it, and then my hand lingered on the empty pillow next to me. Sarah's side of the bed was cold. It had been cold for a while. Not just today. Not just this week. For months, maybe. I just didn't realize how cold until it was too late. I pushed myself up, the usual dull ache in my lower back reminding me I wasn't 20 anymore. Coffee was the first order of business. Always. I shuffled into the kitchen, the floorboards creaking under my weight. The smell of stale air hung in the quiet house. We used to fill this house with noise. Laughter. Sometimes arguments. Now it was just me and the echo of what used to be. I flicked on the kettle, waiting for the hiss and rumble. That's when I saw it. On the fridge door, held by a magnet shaped like a smiling avocado, a gift from her sister from some quirky little shop. A simple piece of printer paper, folded once. My name written on the front in her neat, familiar handwriting. My heart seized. It wasn't a birthday card. It wasn't a grocery list. It was too small for that, too carefully placed. My hand trembled as I reached for it. Paper felt thin, like it could tear apart with too much pressure. I unfolded it slowly. Her words hit me like a physical blow, a gut punch. Each sentence was a hammer strike. "Dear Mark," it began. That felt formal, distant. Not like us, not like the Sarah I knew. "I've gone. I can't do this anymore. This isn't working for me. I need to find my own path. I wish you all the best, Sarah." That was it. 4 short sentences, no explanation. No goodbye in person. Just a note on the fridge, my wife of 10 years. Gone. Like she was just popping out for milk, but she wasn't coming back. My mind reeled. What did she mean? This isn't working for me. What path? My hand started to shake uncontrollably. The paper rustled. I reread it. Over and over. Each time the words seemed to burn deeper into my brain. Gone. My wife. Gone. My vision blurred. The kettle whistled shrilly, but I didn't move. I just stood there staring at the note. My world had just shattered, and it was so quiet. Too quiet. My ears started ringing. I felt like I was drowning in the silence of my own house. Coffee, the routine, the life I'd planned for us, it all disappeared in an instant. All because of 4 short sentences on a piece of printer paper. Then a different feeling started to creep in. Through the shock, through the pain, a cold, hard knot of something else began to form in my chest. Anger. Pure, raw fury. How could she do this? Just leave. No discussion, no fight, no attempt to fix anything. Just a note on the fridge. Like I was a landlord and she was moving out of a rented room. Like I was nobody. Like our entire life together meant so little that it could be dismissed with a few lines of hastily written words. My eyes fixated on the crumpled note in my hand. Then a thought, a truly dark, cynical thought sparked in my mind. This wasn't just a goodbye, this was evidence. Evidence of abandonment. Evidence that she left me. I don't know why that thought came to me. Maybe it was the sudden instinct for survival, for self-preservation, when everything else was crumbling. Maybe it was the anger talking. But it was there. A clear, stark idea. I carefully smoothed out the paper, almost reverently. My fingers traced her handwriting. The way she made her S with a slight curve, the little loop in her E. It was so her. So familiar. And yet the words were from a stranger. a stranger who had just ripped my life apart. I didn't throw the note away. I didn't crumple it again in rage. I folded it once more, carefully, and tucked it into my pocket. My mind was already racing, moving past the initial shock and grief towards something colder, harder, towards what I would do next. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this note, this awful, heartbreaking piece of paper, would be central to it all. It would be my proof. It would be my weapon. And I didn't even know it then, but holding that note, I had already started the war. And it all started with a simple note on the fridge. The first few days were a blur of unreality. The house was a tomb. Every object, every space seemed to scream her absence. Her toothbrush was still in the holder, her hair tie still on the bedside table. It was like she would walk back in at any moment, apologizing for a bad joke, for a moment of madness. But she didn't. The silence was absolute, broken only by the occasional creak of the house settling or the hum of the refrigerator. Each sound seemed magnified, mocking the stillness. I ate instant noodles for every meal, or nothing at all. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, or rather, one my mind refused to grant me. When I did drift off, it was into a fitful shallow sleep, haunted by images of her face, of our wedding day, of every happy memory now tainted by her sudden departure. I tried calling her. At first, it was every hour. Her phone just went straight to voicemail. The person you are calling is unavailable. A robotic voice telling me what I already knew. After a day, I started leaving messages. Desperate pleas. Angry demands, soft pleading whispers. Nothing, no response. Her family didn't know where she was, or at least they claimed not to. Her sister, who used to text me jokes, now gave me clipped, short answers. I haven't heard from her, Mark. I am sorry. But I could hear the hesitation, the lie in her voice. They were protecting her. Or maybe they were just as confused as I was. I couldn't tell. My trust was gone. The shock slowly began to wear off, replaced by a deep, hollow ache. And then the anger returned, stronger than before. It wasn't just a flare-up now. It was a constant simmering rage, a bitter resentment that churned in my gut. How could she be so selfish, so cruel? To just vanish, leaving a trail of questions and shattered pieces. I thought about the note in my pocket. I had moved it to a safe place, a small locked box in my desk drawer. It was proof. Proof she had left. Proof I was the victim here. I spent hours pacing the house. I tried to clean to distract myself, but every chore felt meaningless. The dust motes dancing in the sunlight seemed to mock my solitude. I found myself replaying every conversation, every argument, every quiet moment we had shared in the last few months. Was there a sign I missed? A red flag I ignored? She had been distant, yes. More time spent on her phone, less time talking to me. But I had dismissed it. Work stress, I told myself. Just a phase. Everyone goes through it. I was wrong, terribly wrong. Thought of divorce came slowly at first, like a whisper in the back of my mind. Then it grew louder, more insistent. It started as a reaction to her perceived injustice. She abandoned me. She wanted out. Fine. But she wouldn't get away with it scot-free. This wasn't some amicable separation. This was an ambush. This was a hostile takeover of my life, and I would fight back. The note, the crumpled piece of paper now safely tucked away, solidified my resolve. It was clear. She abandoned the marriage. She abandoned me. The idea of using the note, of bringing lawyers into this deeply personal catastrophe, felt cold and calculating. But then I looked around the house. Our house. The furniture we picked out together. The photos on the wall. The garden we had spent weekends tending. All of it. Our shared life. And she just walked away from it. From all of it without a word. The thought of losing half of everything, of being financially crippled because she decided to find her path, was unbearable. The anger fueled me. It became a shield against the pain, a justification for the actions I was about to take. I started doing research online. Divorce laws, alimony, asset division. It was a dark, depressing rabbit hole. But the more I read, the more I understood. Abandonment was a factor, a significant factor, especially if it was proven, and I had the proof, a signed confession, a goodbye note. I didn't want to be this person, the person who weaponized a note. But what choice did she leave me? She had fired the first shot. She had walked out on our life, and I was left to pick up the pieces. The decision was made. I would file for divorce, and I would use the note. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about survival. It was about not being left with nothing. It was about making sure that her unilateral decision had consequences. For her. And maybe, just maybe, it was about getting some semblance of justice. For the way she had ripped my world apart. The hollow ache in my chest remained. But now it was surrounded by a hardened shell of determination. I was ready to fight, and I had the perfect opening salvo. The little avocado magnet on the fridge remained empty. A silent monument to a life that had ended with a whisper. Finding a lawyer felt like another betrayal, not of Sarah, but of myself. It was the ultimate admission that everything was truly over, that there was no going back, no fixing it. It was the formal step into the realm of the broken. I looked up family law practices online, feeling a strange mix of dread and grim determination. I chose one of a good reputation, a firm that specialized in high-conflict divorces. I figured mine would be exactly that. I booked a consultation. The day of the meeting, I felt a knot in my stomach. The lawyer's office was sleek and modern, all glass and polished wood. It felt sterile, cold, like a surgeon's room. Not a place for raw, bleeding hearts. Mr. Davies was his name. He was a man in his late 50s, silver-haired with kind but tired eyes behind rimless glasses. He looked like he'd seen it all. I hoped he had. I sat across from his large desk, clutching a worn folder. Inside was the note. I started talking, my voice shaky at first, then gaining strength as the anger resurfaced. I told him everything. How we met, our wedding, the 10 years of marriage, the growing distance, and finally the morning I found the note. Tried to keep my voice even, factual, but I could feel the emotion bubbling just beneath the surface. I wanted him to understand the depths of my betrayal. I wanted him to see Sarah's actions not just as a legal maneuver, but as a cruel abandonment. When I finished, Mr. Davies nodded slowly. He picked up a pen, twirling it between his fingers. "So you haven't had any contact with your wife since then?" he asked. I shook my head. "No calls, no texts, no emails. No one knows where she is," I confirmed. "And she hasn't taken any significant assets, like withdrawing large sums of money or emptying accounts?" I told him no. As far as I knew, our joint accounts were still intact. My credit cards were fine. She just vanished. Then, with a deep breath, I pulled the note from the folder. I placed it on his desk, sliding it across the polished surface. It felt like I was presenting a piece of my own heart for inspection. "And this," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "is what she left." Mr. Davies picked it up. He read it, his expression unreadable. He held it up to the light, examining the paper. The handwriting. I watched his face for any reaction. A flicker of surprise, a hint of sympathy. Anything. But his face remained neutral, professional. He put it down carefully. "This is very significant, Mark," he said, his voice calm. "This note in her handwriting, stating she has gone and can't do this anymore, can be strong evidence of abandonment." He explained the legal implications. In many states, including ours, abandonment can be a factor in fault-based divorce. It can impact things like alimony, property division, even child custody, if there were children involved, though you mentioned you don't have any. It demonstrates a unilateral decision to end the marriage and sever ties without warning or negotiation. He leaned forward slightly. "It shows she left of her own accord, without coercion, without dispute from you, and without a stated intent to return. This is crucial." I listened, absorbing his words. It felt validating in a strange way. My pain was recognized, my anger justified, but it also felt incredibly cold. He was talking about my life, my marriage, my broken heart, in terms of legal advantage and strategic maneuvers. It was efficient. It was necessary. But it was also completely devoid of the human element. "So, what does this mean for me?" I asked. "It means we have a strong case for you being the aggrieved party," Mr. Davies replied. "It might simplify the process in some ways, but also complicate it in others. She might try to deny it, or claim duress, or that you drove her away. But this note is a powerful piece of evidence against such claims. Her signature, her clear statement, it's hard to refute." He laid out the next steps: filing the petition, serving Sarah with the papers, if we could find her, discovery, mediation, potentially court. It all sounded like a foreign language, a grim itinerary for a journey I never wanted to take. He explained the costs, the time commitment, the emotional toll. I knew it would be a battle, but I felt a strange sense of resolve. I had to do this. For me, for the life she destroyed. As I left his office, the note still felt heavy in my pocket, even though I had given him a copy. It was no longer just a symbol of my heartbreak. It was now a legal document, a piece of leverage. The transformation felt complete. The man who walked into that office was hurting, lost. The man who walked out was a claimant, an adversary. And all because of 4 short sentences from the woman I loved, written on a note, left on the fridge, under a smiling avocado magnet. The world had shifted on its axis, and I was now standing on a battlefield I never asked for. It's easy to look back now and simplify things, to say, she just left. But a marriage doesn't break overnight. It cracks, slowly, piece by piece, until it shatters. And even then, sometimes you don't see the cracks until the whole thing falls apart. I wanted to believe it was sudden, a cruel, inexplicable act. But deep down, I knew better. The resentment wasn't just about the note. It was about everything that led up to it. Our marriage started beautifully, like most do, full of hope, laughter, shared dreams. We were so in love, we finished each other's sentences. We planned our future, down to the color of the kitchen cabinets and the names of our hypothetical children. But somewhere along the way, the finishing of sentences turned into assumptions. The shared dreams became separate paths. The laughter grew quieter. It started subtly. Little things. She'd spend more time in her study, her door closed, working on her freelance design projects. I'd spend more time in the garage, tinkering with my old car or watching sports. We still ate dinner together most nights, but the conversation grew thin. It was like we were going through the motions. How was your day? Fine. Yours? Good. And then silence. Not comfortable silence, but empty silence. I tried at first. I remember suggesting date nights. She'd agree, then cancel last minute, citing a deadline or being too tired. I tried to initiate intimacy. She'd turn away or make an excuse. It felt like I was constantly pursuing her, trying to win her back, when I hadn't even realized I'd lost her. And each rejection, each withdrawn hand, each sighed "I am just tired" chipped away at me. I started to feel like a burden, an obligation, not a partner, not a husband. I remember one particular argument. It wasn't even an argument, more like a monologue from me. I had come home excited about a promotion I'd been offered. I'd worked so hard for it, I told her, waiting for her reaction. She just nodded, her eyes still on her laptop screen. "That's nice, Mark," she said without looking up. "That's really great." It felt so hollow, like she didn't care. Like my success, my life, was just background noise to her. I exploded. Not yelling, but with a quiet, bitter intensity. I told her I felt like she wasn't present anymore. That she was miles away, even when she was right beside me. She looked up then. Her eyes were blank, distant. "I am here, Mark," she said, her voice flat. "I am always here," but she wasn't. And I felt it. I felt her slipping away, a phantom limb I couldn't grasp. I felt a growing sense of loneliness, even in my own home. I started to resent her for it, for her distance, for her perceived indifference, for making me feel so utterly alone. I wasn't perfect either. I know that now. I probably became withdrawn myself. I stopped trying as hard. I probably focused more on my own work, my own hobbies, to fill the void she left. I probably complained too much. I probably took her for granted in other ways, but I never stopped being there. I never stopped wanting to fix things, or so I told myself. I never walked away. The note then wasn't just a note. It was the ultimate insult, culmination of all that unspoken pain and unresolved conflict. It was her final, definitive statement that she was done. Not with us, but with me. It felt like a rejection of my entire being, of everything I had tried to be for her, everything I had invested in our life together. It negated every effort, every sacrifice, every late night I spent worrying about her, every time I put her needs before mine. This growing resentment, this feeling of being abandoned long before she physically left, fueled my decision to use the note in court. It wasn't just cold calculation. It was a cry for justice, a desperate need to show that I was the one left wounded, discarded, and she was the one who had walked away, casually leaving behind a mess for me to clean up. The image of that note, stark against the white fridge door, became a symbol of her indifference, and my resolve to fight, hardened with every memory of the silent arguments, the averted gazes, and the growing chasm between us. It wasn't about revenge, not truly. It was about accountability, and getting what I believed I deserved after so much unspoken suffering. The days leading up to Sarah's disappearance were a strange tapestry of small, unsettling moments. Looking back, they weren't individual threads of meaning, but a pattern I was too blind, or perhaps too unwilling to see. She wasn't her usual self for months. That much was true, but I had my own narrative for it. Work stress, her parents' health issues, just life being hard. I dismissed the changes, attributed them to external factors, never questioning if I was part of the problem. She became meticulous, almost obsessively so. The house was always tidy. Her desk was organized down to the last paperclip. She started doing laundry more frequently, making sure all her clothes were clean, folded, and put away. At the time, I thought it was a good thing. Sarah's getting on top of things, I'd tell myself. Now, it seems like she was clearing out, systematically preparing for a departure, packing without packing, disentangling herself from our shared space. She also started spending more time outdoors, or at least away from the house. Long walks by herself. "Just clearing my head," she'd say, her voice quiet. She started going to a new yoga class, one I hadn't heard her mention before. She'd come back serene, almost distant. I'd ask her about it, try to engage. She'd give short answers. It was good. Relaxing, that was it. No details, no shared experience. It felt like she was building a world outside of ours, brick by silent brick. The most unnerving thing was her silence. She was never a loud person, but she used to hum while cooking or sing along to the radio in the car. Those little sounds that signify life, presence, they faded. Conversations became one-sided, me asking questions, her providing brief, almost non-committal replies. It was like living with a ghost, polite, beautiful ghost who occasionally ate dinner with me. When she left, she didn't take much. That was another strange detail. Her clothes were mostly gone from the closet, but not all of them. Her passport was missing from the drawer where we kept our important documents. Her laptop was gone, but her favorite old worn-out sweatshirt, the one she loved to wear on cozy evenings, was still draped over a chair. Her collection of antique teacups, something she cherished, was untouched in the display cabinet. It was a bizarre, almost random selection of items, as if she packed in a hurry or intentionally left things behind to confuse me, or maybe to make it seem like she just needed a break, not a full escape. Her sister Emily was the first person I called after the initial shock wore off. Emily and Sarah were close, always had been. I expected Emily to be frantic, worried. Instead, she sounded resigned. "Ma, I am so sorry," she'd said, her voice tight. "I don't know where she is. She hasn't contacted me." But her tone suggested she knew something she wasn't sharing. When I pressed her, her voice hardened. "This is between you and Sarah, Mark. I can't get involved." The sudden coldness from someone who had always been so warm, so much a part of our lives, felt like another betrayal. Like they were all in on some secret. Our mutual friends, the ones we used to have dinner with every Friday night, were equally evasive. They offered sympathies, but no information. They looked at me with pity, which I hated. I didn't want pity. I wanted answers. I wanted my wife back, or at least an explanation. They would change the subject quickly if I brought up Sarah or the note. It was like an unspoken pact. Slowly, the picture formed in my mind, not of Sarah being kidnapped or in danger, but of a calculated, deliberate departure. She hadn't just walked out on a whim. She had planned this. The meticulous cleaning, the quiet withdrawals, the conversations with her sister and friends that I was clearly not privy to. It all pointed to a carefully orchestrated exit. And the note, so casual, so dismissive, was just the final brutal flourish. It was the period at the end of a very long, silent sentence. The thought that she had spent weeks, maybe months, preparing to leave me, all while living under the same roof, sharing the same bed, made my blood run cold. It felt like I had been living with a ghost. Yes, but one that was actively plotting its own vanishing act. And the ultimate irony was, I had dismissed all the warning signs. I had minimized her distance. I had failed to see the goodbye in her silence. And now, armed with her final, shocking message, I was ready to use it. Not just to win a divorce, but to articulate the depth of the deception and the pain she had inflicted. The ghost of our marriage was now a vengeful spirit, and I was going to make sure it haunted her, just as she had haunted me. Filing the divorce papers was a grim milestone. Mr. Davies handled everything with quiet efficiency. Thick packet of documents filled with legal jargon felt like a heavy stone in my hands. It marked the official end of everything. No more hope, no more what-ifs, just the cold, hard reality of legal dissolution. Papers included a copy of Sarah's note, carefully transcribed and labeled as Exhibit A. Seeing it there, formalized and official, felt strange. It wasn't just my pain now, it was evidence. The biggest hurdle was serving Sarah. Since no one knew where she was or pretended not to, we had to get creative. Mr. Davies advised trying her last known workplace, her parents' address, even sending it via certified mail to a general post office box if she had one. We tried everything. Each failed attempt to deliver the papers felt like a new insult. She was making it difficult, extending the agony. It felt like she was still running, still hiding. Finally, after weeks of trying, a process server managed to track her down at an address linked to her sister Emily, in a different part of the state. Apparently, Sarah had been living with Emily all along, or at least staying there. When I heard that, the rage flared up again. Emily knew they were both lying to me. It felt like a conspiracy. A deliberate act to keep me in the dark, to prolong my suffering. The fact that she was living comfortably, likely getting support from her family while I was left in our empty house, reeling, fueled my sense of injustice. The moment she was served, the legal machine truly whirred to life. Her lawyer, a sharp, aggressive woman named Miss Chen, immediately contacted Mr. Davies. The tone was set. It wasn't going to be amicable. Miss Chen's initial letter was filled with denials and counter-accusations. Sarah, through her lawyer, claimed she didn't abandon me, but merely sought a period of separation to address irreconcilable differences. The letter stated she was merely taking space and that my filing for divorce was premature and vindictive. She left a goodbye note. That's not taking space. That's leaving. Mr. Davies just nodded. Standard defense, Mark. They'll try to reframe her actions. That's where the note comes in. It's hard to spin. I've gone. I can't do this anymore into taking space. The first volley of legal motions and discovery requests started flying. My lawyers requested her financial records, any communications she had with others about her departure, details of her current living situation. Her lawyers in turn requested my financial records, emails, texts, anything that could suggest a breakdown in the marriage on my part. They were digging for dirt. They wanted to prove that I was the cause of her unhappiness, that my actions justified her leaving. The emotional toll was immense. Every document I had to gather, every question I had to answer about our marriage, forced me to relive the pain. It wasn't just about money or assets anymore. It was about dissecting every flaw, every argument, every perceived failing of our decade together. It felt like our entire life was being put on trial, stripped bare and judged by strangers. I felt exposed, vulnerable, and deeply, intensely angry. The note, once a private horror, was now a public spectacle. It was referenced in every legal document. It was a talking point, a strategic advantage. It lost its personal meaning in the glare of the legal spotlight. But paradoxically, it also gained power. It was the undeniable proof. It was the hard truth of her actions, and I clung to that truth. The first court hearing, a preliminary conference, was scheduled. The thought of seeing Sarah again filled me with a mixture of dread and anticipation. What would she look like? What would she say? Would she even acknowledge me? Or would she just look through me, just like she had in the months leading up to her leaving? The divorce wasn't just a legal battle. It was a war of wills, a fight for the narrative of our shared past. And the note, that simple, devastating note, was the flag I was planting in the ground. It was my truth. And I was going to make sure everyone saw it. The fight had truly begun, and there was no turning back. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived, heavy with unspoken anticipation. I dressed carefully, a dark suit, trying to project an image of calm strength, even though my insides were churning. Mr. Davies met me outside the courtroom, his usual steady demeanor, a slight comfort. He gave me last-minute instructions. Don't react. Don't speak unless spoken to. Let me do the talking. I nodded, my throat tight. Courtroom was smaller than I imagined, less grand than on television. Just a few rows of benches, a judge's bench, and the tables for the lawyers. I took a seat at the plaintiff's table with Mr. Davies. My eyes immediately swept the room, and then I saw her, Sarah. She was sitting at the defense table with Miss Chen. My heart hammered against my ribs. She looked different. Thinner, maybe. Her hair was shorter, styled differently. She wore a simple, dark dress. She looked composed. Too composed. My stomach clenched. For a long moment, our eyes met across the sterile courtroom. My breath hitched. All the pain, all the anger, all the memories of our life together flashed through my mind. Her face was impassive. No flicker of recognition, no hint of regret, no spark of the old Sarah. Just a cold, blank stare. It was like looking at a stranger who knew every intimate detail of my life. The impact was devastating. It was like she didn't just leave me, she erased me from her memory. Miss Chen leaned over and whispered something to Sarah. Sarah gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, then looked away. She didn't look at me again during the entire hearing. It was as if I wasn't even there, just an obstacle, a problem to be dealt with. The hearing itself was mostly procedural. The judge, a stern-faced woman, listened as Mr. Davies presented our case, highlighting Sarah's unilateral departure and the infamous note. He spoke calmly, clearly, outlining the evidence of abandonment. I could feel Miss Chen bristling. When it was her turn, Miss Chen stood, her voice sharp and theatrical. She immediately went on the offensive. Your Honor, my client did not abandon the marriage. She sought a period of necessary separation from a toxic and emotionally unsupportive environment. She paused, glancing dramatically at Sarah, who kept her eyes fixed on the table. My client's departure was a desperate measure to preserve her mental and emotional well-being after years of neglect and unhappiness within the marriage. Neglect. Unhappiness. My jaw tightened. She was spinning it, trying to make me out to be the villain. My blood boiled. I wanted to stand up and shout, to tell the judge the truth, to show her how Sarah had quietly suffocated our marriage, how she had withdrawn, how I had begged her to talk. But Mr. Davies' hand gently touched my arm, a silent reminder to stay still. Miss Chen continued. The note, which the plaintiff characterizes as an admission of abandonment, was merely an anguished cry for space. A last resort from a woman who felt unheard and unseen. She even hinted at my supposed controlling behavior and emotional unavailability, painting a picture of me that was utterly unrecognizable. A caricature of a bad husband. It was a full-on character assassination. I wanted to scream. She was twisting everything. Her silence, her distance, her lack of communication was now my fault. Her leaving was my fault. It was a sick, twisted game. My mind flashed back to the endless quiet dinners, the unanswered questions, the cold shoulder. Who was unheard? Who was unseen? It was me. Always me. The judge listened impassively, occasionally interjecting with a question about procedure. She scheduled a mediation session, emphasizing the court's preference for out-of-court settlements. My lawyer accepted. Sarah's lawyer reluctantly agreed. The hearing was over in less than 30 minutes. As we stood to leave, I tried one more time to catch Sarah's eye. Just a glance. A sign of something. Anything. But she remained unyielding, her face a mask. She walked out of the courtroom behind her lawyer, without a backward glance. It was the coldest moment of the entire process, colder than finding the note, colder than the empty house. 'Cause seeing her, seeing how completely she had shut me out, how she could sit there and let her lawyer paint me as a monster, solidified something in me. The heartbreak was sharp, yes, but the determination was sharper. They wanted to play dirty? Fine, I had the note. I had her own words. They could try to spin it, but the paper didn't lie. It was there, her confession. And I would make sure the court saw it for what it was. Her blatant, cruel abandonment. The battle lines were drawn, and I was ready to fight for every single inch. The mediation session was scheduled a few weeks later. It was held in a neutral office building, a room designed to be calming, with soft colors and comfortable chairs. It felt like a trap. Sarah and I sat at opposite ends of a long table, our lawyers flanking us like guardians. Professional mediator, a kind-faced woman with a gentle voice, tried to guide the discussion, but there was no guiding this. The mediator started by asking us to articulate our goals for the divorce. Mr. Davies stated my position clearly: a fair division of assets, taking into account the abandonment and no alimony given her unilateral departure and her ability to support herself. Miss Chen, on Sarah's behalf, countered with a demand for significant alimony, a larger share of the assets, and an insistence that Sarah's departure was due to a breakdown in the marital relationship rather than abandonment. This was the core of it. The note. It kept coming back to the note. Miss Chen again tried to reframe it. My client, feeling overwhelmed and emotionally exhausted, left a note expressing her personal struggle, not a legal declaration of abandonment. It was a cry for help, not a cold, calculated departure. Then, the mediator looked at Sarah. Sarah, would you like to elaborate on that? Your perspective on the note. Sarah finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but clear. I was suffocating, Mark. I was so unhappy. I tried to tell you, but you never listened. My head snapped up. I never listened. I begged you to talk to me. I asked you what was wrong. You just shut down. You just went silent. 'Cause you didn't hear me, she said, her voice rising slightly. You heard what you wanted to hear. You heard tired. You heard stress. You never heard I am desperately unhappy in this marriage. You were always so wrapped up in your own life, your work, your hobbies. You weren't present. You weren't there for me. A cold dread began to spread through me. Was this true? Had I been that blind? I remembered the promotion, her flat reaction, the arguments about my perceived distance. I had always seen it as her withdrawing, her pulling away. But what if she saw it as my absence, my emotional unavailability? I left that note because I couldn't face you, Sarah continued, her eyes fixed on the table. Every time I tried, you made me feel smaller, like my feelings weren't valid. like I was being dramatic. I was afraid to talk to you because I knew you wouldn't understand. I knew you would turn it around on me. My mind raced back. The arguments that weren't arguments, just me expressing my frustration at her silence. Was that how she heard it? Not me trying to connect, but me blaming her? It was like looking at a distorted reflection of our past. I saw my efforts, my frustrations. She saw my failures, my blind spots. Then she dropped a bombshell. I was depressed, Mark. For years. I tried to get help. I started therapy months before I left. I tried to tell you I needed support, but you were too busy, too oblivious. Depressed. Therapy. My mouth went dry. I had no idea. No idea at all. She had never said a word. Not a single word about seeking help. I thought she was just quiet, distant. I never once considered it was clinical depression. How could I have missed that? How could she have hidden it so well? You never told me you were seeing a therapist, I said, my voice hoarse. What was the point? She shot back, finally looking at me, her eyes filled with a raw, desperate pain I had never seen before. You weren't listening to anything else. Why would you listen to that? The air in the room suddenly felt thick, heavy. The mediator was silent. The lawyers were silent. It was just us and the wreckage of our assumptions. My narrative of victimhood, of her cruel abandonment, began to crack. Not fully, not yet, but cracks appeared. If she was truly depressed, struggling in silence, had I contributed to that? Had my own frustrations, my own perceived neglect, pushed her further into isolation? Had the note truly been a cry for help, and I, in my blindness, had seen it only as a weapon? The thought was a sickening blow. The heartbreak wasn't just about her leaving. It was about the realization that we had both been suffering, in parallel, unable to reach each other through the growing wall of silence and misunderstanding. The note wasn't just a goodbye. It was a marker of a deeper, far more tragic failure. Our failure. The revelation of Sarah's depression hung in the air, long after the mediation session ended. It didn't magically make her leaving okay, or the note less painful, but it shifted something inside me. It introduced a new layer of complexity to the narrative I had so carefully constructed. My story of the abandoned husband, the victim, suddenly had an asterisk next to it. A large, glaring asterisk. I spent days replaying her words. You never listened. You weren't present. You were too busy, too oblivious. Was it true? Had I been so caught up in my own feelings of neglect that I missed hers entirely? I thought back to the distant silences, the flat responses. I had interpreted them as indifference, as her pulling away. But what if they were symptoms of a much deeper struggle? What if her silence wasn't a choice, but a consequence of her illness? The anger was still there, but it was now laced with a bitter regret. Regret for what I hadn't seen, what I hadn't understood. Regret for how I had reacted. I had taken her departure as a personal insult, a deliberate act of cruelty. And in my pain I had sought to punish her, to use her very words against her. But if those words came from a place of deep despair, a desperate need for escape from a suffering I knew nothing about, then my actions seemed far less justified. They seemed cold, vengeful. The legal battle continued, relentless and draining. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, was unfazed by Sarah's claims of depression. It's a common defense strategy, Mark. Emotional distress. It attempts to mitigate the impact of the abandonment. But the fact remains, she left. She signed the note. She didn't communicate her distress directly to you or seek joint counseling before making such a drastic move. His words were logical, legally sound. But they felt hollow now. The human element, the raw, bleeding core of our failed marriage, was being ignored for the sake of legal strategy. Sarah's lawyers still pushed for alimony, arguing that her forced separation due to my marital misconduct, their words for my alleged emotional unavailability, had impacted her career and financial stability. It was an endless back and forth of accusations and counter-accusations. Every piece of paper, every email, every text message from our past was scrutinized, twisted, and used as ammunition. Our entire life together was reduced to bullet points on legal briefs. True heartbreak, I realized, wasn't just the end of the marriage. It was the realization that we had both suffered, separately, in silence. That we had been two ships passing in the night, slowly drifting apart, each thinking the other was the one abandoning the voyage. She thought I wasn't listening. I thought she wasn't talking. And the note, that devastating, simple note, was the collision. Winning the divorce no longer felt like a victory. It felt like an empty promise. Even if I got everything I wanted financially, even if the court ruled in my favor on the abandonment, what would I have won? A bigger share of an empty house? More money in a lonely bank account? The price was too high. Price was the complete destruction of any dignity or love that had ever existed between us. It was watching the woman I once adored be reduced to an adversary, a source of legal headache, and realizing that I had played a part in that reduction. I still had the original note. I kept it in the lockbox. Sometimes I would take it out and look at it. It no longer sparked the same white-hot rage. Instead, it brought a profound sadness, a melancholy. It was a monument to misunderstanding, to unsaid words, to missed opportunities. It was the epitaph of our love story, a story that ended not with a bang, but with a barely audible whisper on a piece of paper, and a subsequent roar in a courtroom. The more I reflected, the more I understood that winning the battle would mean losing something far more significant. The chance to understand, to forgive, and perhaps to heal. But the legal machine was in motion, and there was no stopping it now. The note had been introduced, the fight was on, and it was destroying us both. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. It ended not with a dramatic courtroom showdown, but with a quiet, almost anticlimactic judgment. The judge, having reviewed all the evidence including Sarah's note and the subsequent arguments, ruled that Sarah's departure did constitute abandonment. This meant I received a larger share of the marital assets, and she was awarded no alimony. It was, by all legal standards, a clear win for me. I should have felt triumphant. I should have felt vindicated. But, as Mr. Davies congratulated me, shaking my hand, I felt nothing but a hollow ache in my chest. The relief was there, fleeting, but it was quickly replaced by a profound emptiness. I had won, but what exactly had I won? A house that felt even larger and emptier now. A bank account with more zeros, but no one to share it with. I left the courthouse that day, not with a sense of closure, but with a heavy burden. The legal victory felt like a defeat in every other aspect of my life. I had sought justice, but I found only a cold, clinical separation. The marriage was over, legally, formally. But the emotional wounds, the lingering questions remained. Sarah was not there for the final judgment. She had left it to her lawyer, a final act of distance. I never saw her again in person after that mediation session. She moved out of state, I heard, to be closer to family, away from the life we had built. Part of me still resented her for that, for the easy escape, for leaving me to clean up the mess. But a larger part of me, the part that had been touched by her admission of depression, the part that now understood the deep chasm of misunderstanding between us, felt a profound sadness for her too. for her silent suffering, for the fact that we were unable to bridge that gap. The note, the very thing I used to win, now felt like a symbol of that ultimate failure. It wasn't just her goodbye, it was our failure to communicate. Our failure to truly see each other. I still have the note. It sits in the locked box in my desk drawer. Sometimes on quiet evenings, I take it out. I run my fingers over the paper, over her familiar handwriting. It's no longer a weapon. It's just a piece of paper. A reminder. A stark physical manifestation of how quickly everything can unravel, and how, in our pain and our blindness, we can inflict wounds that never truly heal. My life now is quieter, much quieter. I've started seeing a therapist myself, trying to untangle the knotted threads of resentment, grief, and regret. I am learning about my own part in the breakdown, about the ways I might have been emotionally unavailable, how my own coping mechanisms led me to miss her silent cries. It's a painful process, but a necessary one. The house still feels too big, too empty. I've tried to make it my own again, to erase the ghosts, but they linger. Every corner holds a memory, a ghost of a laugh, a quiet moment, a bitter argument. A bitter argument. The avocado magnet is still on the fridge. I never took it down. Sometimes I stare at it, remembering the day I found the note underneath it. The day my life changed forever. The heartbreak isn't just that she left. It's that we both lost so much. It's the knowledge that our love, once so vibrant and full of promise, withered and died in silence, culminating in a cold legal battle, fueled by a few devastating words. The note was her goodbye. My using it was my desperate, clumsy attempt to grasp onto something, anything, when my world collapsed. But in the end, all it did was formalize the destruction. And now, I live with the quiet aftermath, understanding that some victories are the most heartbreaking losses of all. The note hangs in my memory, a permanent searing scar, a reminder of a love lost and a future unwritten.